My mother laughed first. Not a loud laugh, not the kind that belongs to joy. It was the thin, polished kind she used when she wanted a room to agree with her before anyone had time to think. We were standing in my sister Vanessa's kitchen on Easter Sunday, the table still crowded with ham glaze, deviled eggs, and half-empty wine glasses. 23 people had filled that house by noon. By 3, the windows were cracked open from the heat of too many bodies and too much performance. My mother lifted her glass and looked straight at me. "Lena," she said, smiling like she was about to offer wisdom instead of humiliation. "You'll never have a house like your sister's if you keep drifting through life." A few people laughed because she did. My father nodded once from his chair by the fireplace, like this was simply a fact being entered into the family record. Then Vanessa leaned against her marble island, crossed her arms, and gave me that little smirk I had known since childhood. "You're just jealous, right?" Something in the room shifted after that. Not enough for anyone to stop it, just enough for everyone to know they had heard it. I remember setting my water glass down very carefully. I remember the clink it made against the coaster. I remember thinking that if I spoke too soon, they would turn me into the difficult one again. So I didn't. I looked at my sister's white cabinets, her gold fixtures, the giant pendant lights my mother had bragged about for an hour, and I said the only thing that came to me. "Maybe." Vanessa smiled wider, like she had won something. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 2 weeks later, I would open my own front door, invite her in for tea, and watch her go pale enough to grab her phone with both hands. If quiet strength means something to you, subscribe. Power moves quietly. But that moment didn't begin on Easter. It began 12 years earlier, in a split-level house outside Columbus, Ohio, when I was 19, and still believed that whatever my parents told me had to be true. And if you've ever sat in a room full of relatives and realized you were the version of the story everyone had agreed to misunderstand, you already know how this starts. It started on a Tuesday afternoon that didn't feel important at the time. I was 19, sitting at our kitchen table with a stack of college paperwork spread out in front of me. Acceptance letter, housing forms, a list of required textbooks I couldn't pronounce yet. The kind of afternoon that's supposed to feel like the beginning of something. My mother stood at the sink, rinsing a mug that was already clean. She didn't turn around when she said it. "Lena, sweetheart, we need to talk about your college fund." There's a tone parents use when they've practiced a sentence enough times that it starts to sound gentle, even when it isn't. I remember folding my hands in my lap, waiting. She dried the mug slowly. Too slowly. "The market hasn't been kind," she continued. "The account didn't recover the way we expected." I didn't understand right away. Not fully. I was 19. Not stupid, but still hopeful in a way that makes things softer than they really are. "So, what does that mean?" I asked. She turned then, gave me that same expression she used at Easter all those years later, concern wrapped around control. "It means the fund is gone." Gone. Such a clean word for something that had taken 18 years to build. I nodded before I even felt anything, like my body had already decided to cooperate before my mind caught up. "Okay," I said. "We'll figure it out." We. That word should have felt safe. It didn't. The next morning, she drove me to the bank. We sat across from a woman with kind eyes who spoke in careful, rehearsed phrases about federal loans, interest rates, repayment plans. My mother filled in most of the answers before I could open my mouth. "Yes, she understands. Yes, we've discussed it. Yes, she's prepared." I signed where they told me to sign. Initialed where they pointed. Walked out with a folder full of debt and a quiet sense that something had shifted, though I couldn't name what yet. On the drive home, my mother reached over and squeezed my hand. "This will make you stronger," she said. I stared out the window at passing houses. Lawns trimmed, curtains drawn, lives contained neatly behind front doors. I believed her. Because at 19, you don't question the person who taught you what truth sounds like. But looking back now, that was the first moment something didn't add up. Not loudly, just enough to stay with me. The kind of feeling you don't have language for yet, but your body remembers anyway. And if you've ever trusted someone completely, only to realize later that trust was built on something you never got to verify, you know how quiet that realization can be at first. It doesn't explode. It settles. And waits. By the time I graduated, that quiet feeling had turned into a pattern. Not something I could prove, just something I kept noticing. Vanessa never had to figure things out. She moved through life like doors opened a second before she reached them. When she wanted something, it appeared, explained, justified, wrapped in language that made it sound earned. She's always been disciplined. She plans ahead. She makes smart decisions. I heard those sentences so often they started to sound like facts. Meanwhile, my life was described differently. Lena's still exploring. She hasn't quite found her footing. She's creative, just not practical. It wasn't what they said. It was how often they said it. How consistent the framing was. By 24, Vanessa had a fiancé and a real estate agent. By 26, she had a 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood my mother pronounced like it meant something. Westerville, she would say, like it deserved a pause. I remember the first time I walked through that house. Open concept kitchen, white cabinets, granite countertops that caught the light just right. My mother trailed behind Vanessa like a tour guide. She chose everything herself, she told anyone within earshot. Vanessa smiled but didn't correct her. I stood near the edge of the living room, not touching anything. Not because I was afraid of breaking something, just because nothing in that space felt like it belonged to me. "Do you love it?" Vanessa asked, turning toward me. "I do," I said. And I meant it. What I didn't say was that something inside me tightened as I walked through each room. Not jealousy. Something quieter. Something closer to confusion. Because even then, something still didn't make sense. We had grown up in the same house, same parents, same rules at least on paper. So, how did her path feel? Supported in a way mine never was. That question didn't accuse anyone. It just stayed with me, like a line you can't quite finish. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my car in Vanessa's driveway longer than I needed to. My phone lit up with a message from my mother, before I even pulled out. "Doesn't it make you want more for yourself?" I stared at the screen, then typed back, "I already do." She didn't respond. And that was the thing about my mother, she didn't argue when she didn't need to. She just adjusted the narrative later, quietly, efficiently. And by the next family gathering, everyone would be repeating a version of my life I didn't quite recognize, but couldn't fully correct either. If you've ever had that feeling like your story was being told in rooms you weren't in, stay with me. Because the truth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits until you're finally ready to hear it. The call came on a Wednesday night. I almost didn't answer. It was 9:12 p.m., and I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my 1-bedroom apartment, laptop open, trying to finish a client report before the deadline the next morning. My place was small, about 600 square feet, with a heater that clicked too loudly and a window that didn't quite seal in the winter. But it was mine. Every bill, every piece of furniture, every late payment I had learned from it all belonged to me. My phone buzzed across the floor. Uncle David. He never called. We texted on birthdays, holidays sometimes. That was it. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up. "Hey, Uncle David." A pause. "Lena, are you busy?" His voice sounded off, like he had been holding something too long. "I can talk. What's going on?" Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear something in the background. Maybe a TV. Maybe just him pacing. "I've been meaning to tell you something for years," he said. "I just didn't know if it was my place." My stomach tightened without permission. "Tell me what?" He exhaled slowly. "Your college fund wasn't lost, Lena. Everything in the room went still. Even the heater stopped clicking." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean your mother withdrew it. All of it." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "It was a custodial account," he continued. "I was at the bank that day. I saw her sign the paperwork." The words didn't hit all at once. They landed in pieces. "Withdrawn. All of it. She told me to stay out of it," he said quietly. We didn't speak for almost 2 years after that. I pressed my hand flat against the floor to steady myself. "How much?" I asked. 41,000 and change. 41,000. My chest didn't tighten the way I expected. It didn't burn. It didn't break. It just went quiet. "And Lena," he added, softer now, "that money didn't disappear." I closed my eyes. "Where did it go?" A long silence. Then, 2 weeks later, Vanessa closed on her house. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't even feel the floor beneath me anymore. Because suddenly, everything I had ever been told rearranged itself. Not into something louder, but into something clear. And if you've ever had a moment where the past shifts all at once, where every memory reorders itself into a new truth, you know it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels still, too still, like your life just changed shape, and no one else in the room noticed. I didn't cry. That's the part people expect, but it didn't happen. I stayed on the floor long after Uncle David hung up, my phone still in my hand, the screen dark. The room looked exactly the same. Same couch, same chipped coffee table, same report blinking on my laptop, waiting to be finished. Nothing had changed. Except everything had. $41,000. Withdrawn. Reassigned. Rewritten. I leaned my head back against the wall and stared at the ceiling. There was a faint water stain shaped like a cloud. I had noticed it the day I moved in. I remember thinking I'd get it fixed eventually. I never did. Just like I never questioned the story I was given. Because what do you do with information like that? Call your mother and ask if she stole from you? Ask your sister if she knew? Sit your father down and demand an explanation he was never going to give? I already knew how that would go. My mother didn't argue, she redirected. She would say Uncle David was exaggerating, that he had always been dramatic, that I was misunderstanding something complicated. Vanessa would defend her, not aggressively, just enough to make me look unreasonable. And my father, he would stay quiet, maybe adjust the volume on the TV, maybe say, let's not make this bigger than it is. And somehow by the end of it, I would be the one who had done something wrong. The ungrateful daughter, the difficult one, the one who couldn't let things go. I knew the script. I had lived inside it my whole life, so I didn't call anyone. Instead, I got up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink, and then I opened my laptop. Not the report. A new tab. A blank spreadsheet. 3 columns. Income. Expenses. Target. I stared at that third column for a long time before typing anything. The number I entered didn't feel real. It wasn't just about money. It was about something I couldn't say out loud yet. Something like space, proof, freedom. I adjusted my monthly budget down to the dollar. Cut things I hadn't questioned before. Subscriptions, takeout, anything that didn't move me forward. Then I set up an automatic transfer. Every month, no exceptions. I wasn't going to argue my way into being seen. I was going to build something they couldn't ignore. And if you've ever realized that explaining yourself won't change how someone sees you, you understand this moment. It's not anger. It's clarity. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be permanent. The next time my mother called, she sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. Lena, sweetheart, she said. Like we had just spoken yesterday and nothing in the world had shifted. I was talking to Aunt Carol, and she mentioned a landlord she knows. Very reasonable. I thought of you immediately. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed between my ear and shoulder, slicing an apple I suddenly didn't want. I'm not looking for a new place, Mom. A soft laugh. Well, it never hurts to have options, especially when things are tight. Tight. That word again. I didn't say things were tight. A pause, just long enough to register. Well, someone did, she replied lightly. I just worry about you. Of course she did. After we hung up, I set the knife down and stared at my phone. Then I opened my messages. 7 unread. Aunt Carol. Your mom said you might need something more affordable. Let me know if you want that contact. Cousin Aaron. Thinking of you. Housing is tough right now. Uncle Mark. No shame in downsizing, kid. 7 different people. Same story. My story. Told by someone else. I sat down slowly at the table, scrolling through each message like they might change if I looked at them long enough. They didn't. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was distribution. My mother had already decided who I was and then made sure everyone else agreed before I had a chance to say otherwise. I opened Facebook. There it was. Vanessa's latest post. A photo of her kitchen, sunlight hitting the countertops just right. My mother tagged in the caption. So grateful for this life. Couldn't have done it without you. Posted that morning. My birthday. I stared at the screen. Then I locked my phone. No reaction. No comment. No correction. Just silence. But not the kind I used to sit in. This one was different. Intentional. I stood up, walked back to my laptop, and opened my spreadsheet. I increased my monthly transfer by another $200. It meant cutting more. Fewer comforts, fewer distractions. But clarity has a way of simplifying decisions. My mother measured worth in square footage. Fine. I would stop arguing about the measurement and just change the result. If you know what it's like to have someone quietly rewrite your life in rooms you're not in, you learn something important. You don't chase the narrative. You outgrow it. And that doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, invisible decisions. No one else thinks matter. Until one day, they do. There was one person at work who didn't treat me like I was still figuring things out. Her name was Marianne Cole, Director of Risk Operations. Mid-50s, silver hair she never bothered to dye, and the kind of presence that made people sit straighter without knowing why. She didn't waste words. She didn't perform. And most importantly, she paid attention. I hadn't told her anything about my family. Not the fund, not the calls, not the quiet narrative being built behind my back. I just asked her one question. What does it take to move up here? She looked at me for a moment. Not quickly, not casually. Really looked. Then she slid a folder across her desk. You're already doing the work, she said. You just haven't stepped into it yet. Inside the folder was a client file, messy, overdue, and high stakes. A regional healthcare system audit that had already gone sideways once. The previous lead had walked off. This is yours if you want it, she added. It's not clean. It won't be easy. But if you land it, people will notice. I didn't hesitate. I'll take it. That was the beginning of a different kind of silence. Not the one I grew up with. This one was focused, deliberate. For the next 10 months, my world narrowed. Early mornings, late nights, weekends that blurred into weekdays. I stopped explaining my schedule to anyone who wouldn't understand it anyway. I automated my savings, increased my contributions, learned more than I thought I was capable of learning in that short of time. And slowly, quietly, things started to shift. Not outwardly. Not in a way my family would ever recognize. But internally, everything was tightening into place. There's something that happens when you stop waiting to be acknowledged. You start moving differently. You speak less. You observe more. You stop offering pieces of yourself to people who have already decided what those pieces mean. I still showed up to family events, still smiled, still listened to my mother describe my life like it was a temporary inconvenience. Oh, Lena's still in that little apartment. She works so much, I worry about her. It's not very stable what she does. I let her talk. Because for the first time I understood something she didn't. Narratives only work when you still need permission to contradict them. And I didn't anymore. If you've ever reached that point where proving yourself stops mattering as much as building yourself, you know how quiet that shift is. No announcement. No moment of recognition. Just a slow, steady realignment. And somewhere in the middle of that year, without telling anyone, my life started to become something no one in my family had prepared a story for. The project closed on a Thursday. No celebration, no announcement, just a final report submitted at 6:42 p.m. and a quiet confirmation email from the client. Approved. Moving forward with renewal. 3 years. 7 figures. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop. For a moment, I just sat there at my desk while the office emptied around me. Chairs rolled back, lights dimmed. Conversations faded into elevators and parking garages. No one made a scene. But something had changed. The following Monday, Marianne called me into her office. She didn't smile when I walked in. She just gestured to the chair. Sit? I did. She folded her hands on the desk, studied me for a second, then said, You delivered under pressure. You didn't escalate noise. You solved problems. That's rare. A pause. Then, I'm moving you up to senior lead. The words didn't land dramatically. They settled, like something that had been waiting for me to catch up to it. Salary adjustments already approved, she added, sliding another paper across the desk. Effective next pay cycle. I glanced at the number, then looked back at her. Thank you. She nodded once. Don't thank me. Keep going. And that was it. No applause, no announcement, just a door opening, and the expectation that I would walk through it. I didn't call my parents, didn't text Vanessa, didn't post anything, because I already knew how that conversation would go. Oh, that's nice, Lena. But is it stable? Does it lead anywhere long-term? You know, Vanessa's thinking about expanding her kitchen. I didn't need that version of the moment, so I kept it, quietly. That night, I went home, changed into sweats, and opened my spreadsheet. Updated the income column. Adjusted the savings. Ran projections. For the first time, the numbers didn't feel like survival. They felt like direction. Not fast. Not flashy. But real. I started reading about investments more seriously. Index funds. Long-term growth. Risk that made sense instead of risk I was forced into. I stopped thinking in months. Started thinking in years. And slowly, something inside me shifted again. Not in response to my family. Not in reaction to what had been taken. But in alignment with what I was building. If you've ever had a win you didn't share because you knew it wouldn't be held with care, you understand this part. Some progress is too important to expose too early. Not because you're hiding, because you're protecting it. And the more I built, the more I realized. I wasn't working toward proving them wrong. I was working toward a life that didn't need their agreement at all. Christmas that year looked exactly the way it always did. Vanessa hosted. Of course she did. Her house had grown since the last time I'd seen it. New furniture, new lighting, a redesigned living room that my mother narrated like it was a museum exhibit. 30,000, she said within minutes of everyone arriving. Just for the remodel, worth every penny. People nodded. Admired. Agreed. I stood near the edge of the room, holding a glass of water, watching the same performance play out with new props. Vanessa chose everything herself, my mother continued, running her hand along the back of the couch. She just has that eye. Vanessa smiled modestly. Didn't correct her. Didn't need to. Because this wasn't about accuracy. It was about consistency. The same story, told over and over, until no one thought to question it. I had gotten good at standing in those rooms without reacting, at letting the words pass through me instead of land on me. But that didn't mean I didn't hear them. My mother found me near the kitchen. So, she said, lowering her voice just enough to feel personal but not enough to be private, still in that apartment? Yes. Well, at least you're saving, right? There it was again. That tone. Concern dressed up as kindness. I am, I said. Vanessa appeared beside her, wine glass in hand. You know, she added lightly, if you had listened to me a few years ago, you could have gotten into the market before everything jumped. I'm okay, I replied. I'm just trying to help. I know. She tilted her head slightly. You don't have to be defensive. I met her eyes. I'm not. A small pause. Not uncomfortable. Just unfamiliar. Because for once, I wasn't playing my usual role. Not explaining. Not shrinking. Just present. My mother stepped in smoothly, placing a hand on Vanessa's arm. Your sister's just on a different timeline, she said, smiling like she was smoothing something over. Everyone gets there eventually. Everyone. Eventually. I nodded. Took a sip of water. Said nothing. Later that night, as people moved toward dessert, I stepped into the hallway for a moment of quiet. That's when Daniel, Vanessa's husband, caught up to me. He held 2 beers, handed me one. You holding up okay? He asked. I raised an eyebrow slightly. I'm fine. He gave a small shrug. Your mom talks a lot. I let out a quiet breath I didn't realize I was holding. Yeah, I said. She does. He glanced back toward the living room, then lowered his voice just a fraction. Not everything she says lines up. That was it. No lecture. No explanation. Just a sentence. But it landed. Because sometimes the most validating thing isn't someone defending you. It's someone quietly acknowledging what you already know. If you've ever had that moment when someone sees through the same thing you've been carrying alone, you know how much it matters. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to remind you. You're not imagining it. The message came on a Wednesday evening. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something, maybe habit, maybe curiosity, made me tap the voicemail instead of deleting it. Hi Lena, this is Mark Delaney. Your mom gave me your number, said we might really get along. I'm in commercial real estate, own a place out in Dublin. Thought maybe we could grab dinner sometime. I didn't listen to the rest. I just sat there at my desk, staring at the screen. Then my phone buzzed again. Mom. Mark is a great guy, stable, owns his home. You should call him. I exhaled slowly. Mom, I didn't ask you to set me up. 3 dots appeared. Then, you're 31, Lena. Another message. No house, no husband, I'm trying to help you. I read that line twice. Not because I didn't understand it. Because I did. Too clearly. I said no, I typed back. A pause. Then, you're going to end up alone. I looked at the screen for a long moment. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. 10 seconds. Maybe 15. Then I locked my phone, set it face down, and turned back to my work. Because for the first time, I didn't feel the need to respond. Not out of weakness, out of recognition. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to the version of me she needed to exist. The one who was behind, the one who needed fixing, the one who could still be managed. But that version was already fading. I finished my work around 10:30 that night, closed my laptop, made tea, sat on the floor like I used to back against the couch, mug warm in my hands. And then, almost without thinking, I opened a real estate app, not to compare, not to wish, just to look. At first, it felt abstract. Prices too high, numbers too distant. But I didn't close it. I kept scrolling. Different neighborhoods, different layouts, different possibilities. And something shifted. Just slightly. Not hope. Not yet. But permission. Permission to imagine something I had quietly written off years ago. If you've ever had someone define your timeline so many times that you started believing it, you know how hard it is to even picture something different. But that night, for the first time, I didn't picture Vanessa's life. I pictured mine, and it looked nothing like the story I had been given. 6 months after that night, things didn't explode. They aligned. Not all at once. Not in a way anyone outside my life would have noticed. But internally, financially, mentally, structurally, everything started tightening into something solid. Marianne called me into her office again. This time, she didn't slide a folder across the desk. She just said, "Close the door." I did. She leaned back slightly, studying me the same way she had the first time. "I'm restructuring the department," she said. "And I need someone who doesn't need supervision to carry weight." A pause. "That's you." I stayed still. Not because I was surprised, but because I understood what she was actually saying. "I'm promoting you to director." The word landed differently this time. Director. Not lead. Not almost. There. The salary jump was significant. The kind that changes decisions. Not just numbers. I nodded once. "Okay." She smiled, just barely. "Good. Because the expectations don't get easier from here." "I don't need easy." "I know." That night I didn't celebrate. I updated my spreadsheet, adjusted projections, recalculated timelines. And for the first time, the number I had written months ago, the one that felt almost unrealistic, started to look reachable. Not comfortably, but truthfully. I started driving on weekends. No destination. Just looking. Different neighborhoods, different elevations, different streets where the houses sat a little farther apart and the silence felt earned instead of empty. I didn't tell anyone. Not Marianne. Not Uncle David. No one. Because I wasn't ready for commentary. Not yet. I wasn't looking for approval. I was looking for alignment. And I found it one Saturday morning. It wasn't dramatic. No music, no moment. Just a house on a quiet hill outside the city. Large windows. Deep porch. Trees that moved slowly in the wind like they had nowhere else to be. I parked across the street, sat in my car, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not longing. Recognition. I didn't go inside that day. I just sat there and let the idea exist. Because when you've spent years being told what your life won't look like, the hardest part isn't building something different. It's allowing yourself to believe you can. And if you've ever reached that edge where your reality starts to stretch beyond the limits someone else placed on you, you know this feeling. It's quiet, but it changes everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. I went back the next weekend. Same street, same house. This time, I didn't stay in the car. The for sale sign was still there, slightly tilted, like it had been through a few windy days and no one had bothered to straighten it. I walked up the driveway slowly, not like I was about to buy it, just like I wanted to understand it. The front door was a deep, matte black. Simple, solid. No attempt to impress, just quiet confidence. Inside, it was open but not overwhelming. Hardwood floors. Natural light that didn't feel staged. A kitchen that looked like it had been used, not just displayed. I moved from room to room without rushing. No fantasy. No performance. Just observation. Could I live here? Not someday. Not if everything goes right. But, realistically, I stepped out onto the back deck. And that's when it settled. Trees stretching out behind the house, layers of green moving softly in the wind. No noise from traffic, no neighbors close enough to feel watched. Just space. Not empty. Intentional. I stood there longer than I meant to. Then I took out my phone. Not to call my mother. Not to tell Vanessa. I called my financial advisor. We walked through everything. Savings, investments, liquidity, risk. Numbers I had been tracking for over a year finally lining up into something actionable. You can do this, he said. Not encouraging. Not emotional. Just factual. That mattered more. I didn't make the offer that day. I went home, opened my spreadsheet again, ran everything twice, then once more, because this wasn't about proving anything. This wasn't about reacting. This was about stepping into something I had built slowly, quietly, without anyone else's permission. 3 days later, I made the call. The offer went in. And then, I waited. Not anxiously, not obsessively, just steady. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't hoping for something I hadn't prepared for. I had already done the work. The rest was just process. If you've ever reached a point where your next step isn't driven by emotion but by alignment, you know how different that feels. It's not adrenaline. It's certainty. And certainty doesn't rush. It doesn't beg. It just stands there. Until the door opens. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in between meetings, standing by the window in a quiet conference room, reviewing notes I didn't actually need to review. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I recognized it. The listing agent. I answered on the second ring. Hi, Lena, she said, voice warm but efficient. I wanted to let you know. Your offer was accepted. Just like that. No build-up. No dramatic pause. Accepted. I didn't react right away. I walked over to the chair, sat down slowly, and let the words settle. Okay, I said. What are the next steps? She walked me through them. Inspections. Paperwork. Closing timeline. I took notes, asked questions, confirmed details. Everything moved forward exactly the way it was supposed to. Calm. Structured. Real. When the call ended, I didn't celebrate. I didn't text anyone. I didn't even smile right away. I just sat there and let the silence expand. Because this moment, the one I had quietly been building toward for over a year, didn't need validation. It didn't need witnesses. It just needed to be real. The next 3 weeks moved quickly. Inspection passed. Financing cleared. Paperwork stacked higher than I expected. On closing day, I sat in a small office with neutral walls, and a woman who had done this 1,000 times before. Sign here. Initial here. Date here. 47 signatures. Maybe more. Each one, a quiet confirmation of something I had once been told I would never have. When it was done, she handed me a small envelope. Inside, a key. Simple, unremarkable, warm from her hand. I walked out to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and held it in my palm. No music, no phone call, just that moment. Then I drove. Not to my apartment, to the house, my house. I parked in the driveway, sat there for a few seconds, then got out, walked up the path, and unlocked the front door. The sound of the lock turning was quieter than I expected. I stepped inside. Empty rooms. Bare floors. Light coming in through the windows exactly the way I remembered. No furniture. No voices. No commentary. Just space. And for the first time, it was mine. If you've ever reached a moment you thought would feel louder but instead felt peaceful, you understand this. Because real change doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in quietly and stays. I didn't move in all at once. There was no moving truck, no big transition day, no one carrying boxes up the driveway or asking where things should go. Just my car, back and forth, a few boxes at a time. Clothes, books, my laptop, a cast iron pan I'd had since my first apartment. Only what mattered. The first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor. No bed frame, no headboard, just a blanket, a pillow, and the quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. I woke up early the next morning to sunlight stretching across the floor in long, soft lines. For a moment, I didn't recognize where I was. Then I remembered. And instead of rushing to tell someone, I made coffee, walked out onto the back deck, and just stood there. No phone in my hand, no message drafted, no one to impress. That was new. I started furnishing the house slowly. Not all at once like Vanessa had. Not curated for effect. Just intentional. A couch first. Deep, neutral, comfortable enough to disappear into after a long day. Then a table. Solid wood. Slight imperfections in the surface that made it feel real. I didn't rush to fill every room. I let the house breathe. One weekend, I painted the living room wall. Took me all day. 2 coats. My arms ached by the end of it, but I didn't mind. Because every small decision inside that space was mine. The only person I invited over was Marianne. She stepped inside, looked around slowly, then walked toward the windows. "Wow," she said quietly. That was it. No exaggeration. No performance. Just recognition. "Does your family know?" she asked after a moment. I shook my head. "Not yet." She turned slightly, studying me. "You're not hiding this," she said. "You're choosing when to share it." "Exactly." She nodded once. "Good." We sat at the kitchen table with 2 glasses of wine, talking about everything except the house. Because she understood something my family never had. This wasn't about showing it. It was about building it. That night, after she left, I opened the top drawer of my desk. Inside were 2 documents, the deed to the house, and the bank statement Uncle David had sent me. I looked at both for a long time, then closed the drawer. Not because I was avoiding it, because I understood now. I didn't need to rush the moment. It would come, and when it did, it wouldn't be loud. If you've ever built something quietly without announcing every step, you know the feeling. There's a kind of strength in not being seen too early. Because when people finally do see it, they're seeing something real. Not something in progress, not something fragile. Something finished. Or close enough to stand on its own. Easter came back around the way it always did. Predictable, decorated, carefully staged. Vanessa hosted again. Of course she did. I parked outside her house and sat in my car for a moment, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. The same house, the same driveway, the same front door I had walked through so many times before, always carrying some version of myself they had already decided on. Only this time, I wasn't bringing that version with me. Inside, the house was already full, voices layered over each other, plates clinking. My mother's tone rising above the rest as she directed people through the kitchen like she owned it. "Careful with that dish." "No, no, that goes on the other side." Vanessa had this whole layout redesigned, it just flows better now. I stepped in quietly. No announcement. No entrance. Just another body in the room. My aunt hugged me. Someone handed me a drink. Conversations moved around me without stopping. Normal. My mother found me within minutes. She always did. "Lena," she said, eyes scanning me quickly, assessing. "You look tired. Are you working too much again?" "I'm fine, Mom." She tilted her head slightly, not convinced but not interested enough to press. She hummed, then turned to the person beside her. "She pushes herself too hard. I worry she doesn't have balance." Of course she did. I moved toward the kitchen island, set my glass down, and let the noise pass around me. Vanessa was near the center of it all, laughing, hosting, moving effortlessly through conversations that circled back to her house, her upgrades, her life. My mother stayed close to her, reinforcing every detail. This table? Custom. The cabinets? She chose every finish. That lighting fixture her idea entirely. I watched for a moment, not with resentment, just awareness. Because for the first time, I could see it clearly. This wasn't about Vanessa. Not really. It was about the story. Who represented success? Who represented potential? And who filled the space in between? I had lived in that space for years, quietly, comfortably, even. But not anymore. After dinner, everyone drifted into the living room. Same arrangement as always. Kids on the floor, adults in chairs, conversations softening into that post-meal rhythm where people are full and a little too relaxed. My mother stood up, glass in hand, smile ready. "I just want to say a few words," she began. The room quieted. Of course it did. She looked around, letting the moment settle exactly the way she liked it. Vanessa, she said warmly, this home, this life you've built, it's something really special. You've worked so hard for this. Applause followed. Expected. Earned at least in the version of the story everyone knew. Then she turned. Toward me. Lena, she continued, voice softening into something that sounded like kindness if you didn't listen too closely. We all believe you'll find your way too. It just takes time. A few people shifted. Someone let out a small, uncertain laugh. Vanessa leaned slightly toward me, just enough for the people nearby to hear. There's no shame in where you are, she said. We all start somewhere. I met her eyes, held them, didn't look away. Of course, I said. And for the first time, I didn't feel small saying it. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I no longer needed to say it there. That was the difference. Before, I would have tried to correct the moment, explain myself, shift how they saw me in real time. Now, I let it pass, like a line in a script I had stopped auditioning for. People moved on quickly. Dessert came out, conversations split into smaller groups, laughter returned, softer this time. But something had already shifted. Not in the room. In me. I stood up, walked toward the hallway, and grabbed my coat. I wasn't upset. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was just done participating in a version of myself that no longer existed. My mother noticed immediately. She always leaves early, she said to no one in particular, loud enough for it to land. I paused near the doorway, then turned back not fully, just enough. Vanessa, I said. She looked up from the couch, mid-conversation. Yeah? I'd love to have you over this Saturday. A small pause. Saturday? She repeated. For tea, I said simply. I just moved. The room didn't go silent, but it changed, subtly, like something had entered the air that didn't quite belong to the script everyone knew. My mother frowned slightly. You moved? She asked. Where? It happened quickly, I said. I'll text Vanessa the address. Vanessa blinked, caught between curiosity and confusion. You didn't tell anyone? I shrugged lightly. It wasn't a big deal. That part was true. Just not in the way they thought. My mother studied me for a second longer than usual. I saw it, that flicker. Not suspicion exactly, but misalignment. Something not adding up. Well, she said finally, smoothing it over with a small smile. I hope it's suitable. It is, I replied. Vanessa stood up slowly. I'll come, she said. Great, I nodded. 2:00. I reached for the door. Drive safe, someone called. Text when you get home, my mother added automatically. I stepped outside before she could say anything else. The air was cooler than it had been earlier. Clean, quiet. I walked to my car, got in, and closed the door. For a moment, I just sat there. Hands steady, breathing even. No adrenaline. No second guessing. Just a clear sense of timing. Because this wasn't about proving anything in that house. It never had been. It was about choosing the right place. To let the truth exist. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I could still see Vanessa's house lit up. Full, familiar. But it didn't hold me anymore. Saturday was 5 days away. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to happen to me. I had already decided what would happen next. Saturday came slowly. Not because I was nervous, but because I was aware of it. Every hour felt intentional. I woke up early, made coffee, and stood in the kitchen for a while, looking out at the trees behind the house. The air was still, quiet in that steady way that doesn't ask anything from you. I didn't rush. There was nothing to rush toward. I cleaned, even though the house was already clean. Wiped down surfaces that didn't need wiping. Adjusted things that were already in place. Not for Vanessa, for me. Because I wanted the space to feel exactly the way it had felt when I first walked into it, clear, calm mine. Around noon, I baked scones, lemon and blueberry. Simple recipe, slightly uneven edges. I didn't fix them. I set the table with 2 plates, 2 cups. Nothing extra. No performance. No staging. By 1:45, everything was ready. Tea steeping. Light coming in through the windows just the way it had the first day. The house holding its quiet without effort. My phone buzzed. Vanessa. On my way. Send the address again? I sent it. A few seconds later. Wait. This area? No reply from me. I set my phone down and walked into the living room. Saturday. Waited. At exactly 2:03, I heard it. Gravel under tires. A car door opening. Then nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just stillness outside. I stood up and walked to the front door. Opened it. Vanessa was standing halfway up the path, her keys still in her hand. She wasn't moving. She was staring at the house like it didn't match anything she had expected. "Hey," I said, calm. "Come in." She blinked, like she had to reset something in her mind, then walked forward slowly. Her heels clicked against the stone. She stepped inside. And stopped. Her eyes moved upward, first the ceiling, the open space, then across the room, taking in the windows, the light, the depth of everything she hadn't prepared herself to see. "This," she started, then stopped. Turned slowly. "This is your place?" "Yes." "You bought this?" "I did." She walked further in, almost without realizing it. Touched the edge of the kitchen counter. Opened a cabinet. Closed it again. Looked out through the windows. "Lena." Her voice had changed. Smaller. "How?" I didn't answer right away. I walked to the table, poured tea into 2 cups, and set one in front of the chair across from me. "I worked," I said simply. "I saved. I planned." She turned back toward me, still trying to place me into something she understood. But nothing fit, because for the first time, I wasn't standing inside the version of me she had always known. I was standing inside something I had built without her, and she didn't know what to do with that. Vanessa didn't sit down. She stayed standing in the middle of the room, like sitting would mean accepting something she wasn't ready to understand yet. Her eyes moved again, slower this time. Not scanning, studying. "This isn't," she started, then stopped herself. "Not what? Not possible? Not supposed to happen?" I didn't fill in the sentence for her. I just took a sip of tea. "It doesn't make sense," she said finally, more to herself than to me. "You were—" She cut herself off. I tilted my head slightly. "I was what?" She hesitated, then exhaled. "I thought you were still figuring things out." There it was. Not cruel, not sharp, just honest. And that made it land even clearer. "I was," I said. "Just not in the way you thought." She looked at me like she was trying to line up 2 different timelines and couldn't get them to overlap. "But the apartment," she said, "Mom said." I know what Mom said. That stopped her. A small pause settled between us. Not tense. Just real. Vanessa walked slowly toward the window again, arms wrapping loosely around herself. "She told everyone you were struggling," she said quietly. "That you were barely keeping up." I didn't respond, because there was nothing to correct anymore. She was hearing it now, in her own voice, and that was enough. After a moment, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone. Her fingers weren't steady. Not dramatically shaking, just slightly off, like something inside her had shifted out of alignment. She tapped the screen, held it to her ear. It rang once, twice. "Mom," she said the second it connected, her voice tighter than I had ever heard it. "You need to come here." A pause. "No, I'm not explaining it, just come. I'll send you the address." She ended the call and stood there for a second, phone still in her hand. Then she looked at me. "What is going on, Lena?" I met her gaze, calm, even. "The truth," I said. That word didn't hit all at once. It settled into the room slowly, like everything else had. Vanessa sat down then, finally, not because she was ready, but because she didn't know where else to stand. We didn't talk much after that. There wasn't anything left to explain yet. The house did that on its own. The silence did too. 19 minutes later, I heard it. Another car pulling into the driveway. Faster than it should have. A door opening sharply. Then another, slower. Vanessa stood up again, almost automatically. I didn't move. Footsteps approached the front door. Quick, controlled, but only just. The handle turned before I reached it. My mother stepped inside. Lavender cardigan, pearl earrings. Composed except for the way her eyes moved too quickly, trying to take everything in at once. She stopped in the entryway. Looked up, then around. And for the first time in my life, Gloria didn't speak. My father stepped in a second later. Slower, quieter. He paused just inside the doorway, one hand still on the frame like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to come all the way in. My mother didn't wait. She moved forward, heels sharp against the floor, eyes scanning everything, the ceilings, the windows, the depth of the space. This, she said, her voice thinner than usual. What is this? I didn't rush to answer. I stood near the table, one hand resting lightly against the back of the chair. My house, I said. The words didn't need emphasis. They held on their own. She turned to me quickly. No, she said, almost instinctively. No, I mean how? When did this happen? I bought it 3 weeks ago. Silence, not the comfortable kind. The kind that forces people to recalculate what they thought they knew. My father finally stepped further inside. His eyes moved slower than hers, more carefully, taking things in piece by piece. Lena, he said, his voice already softening. This is beautiful. I nodded once. Thank you. My mother hadn't moved. She was still standing in the center of the room, but something about her posture had shifted. Less certain, less anchored. You never said anything, she said. You never asked, I replied. That landed, not loudly, but directly. Vanessa stood off to the side, watching both of us, her arms crossed now, not defensive, just holding herself together. I told you, she said to my mother quietly. You needed to see this. My mother didn't respond to her. She was still looking at me, trying to reconcile something that no longer fit into the version of me she had been telling for years. But your job, she said, reaching for something familiar. What was it you were struggling, weren't you? I almost smiled, not out of amusement, out of recognition. I've been a director for over a year, I said. Before that, senior lead, before that I was already managing projects you never asked about. She blinked. Once. Twice. That's not what I heard, she said. I know. Another pause. This one longer. Because now the gap between what she had said and what was standing in front of her was too wide to smooth over. My father walked further into the room. He ran his hand lightly along the back of the couch, the same way my mother used to do in Vanessa's house, but there was no performance in it. Just presence. You did this on your own? He asked. Yes. He nodded slowly. Then something shifted in his face. Not dramatic. Just honest. I'm proud of you, he said. It was the first time I had heard those words from him as an adult. They didn't hit like a wave. They settled. Deep. My mother turned toward him sharply. Richard, she said, warning in her tone, like he had stepped out of place. But he didn't look at her. He looked at me. And for once, he didn't look away. Vanessa moved closer to the table. Her eyes dropped briefly to the surface, then lifted again. There's something else, isn't there? She said. Not accusing, not defensive, just aware. I held her gaze for a moment, then walked to the desk near the window. Opened the top drawer, took out the envelope, set it gently on the table between us. No one needs to raise their voice, I said quietly. We can just look at what's real. My mother's eyes dropped to the envelope. Her fingers tightened slightly at her sides. She knew. Before anyone touched it, she already knew. No one reached for the envelope right away. It sat between us, plain, unremarkable, yet heavier than anything else in the room. My mother didn't move, but I could see it in her face. Recognition. Not of the paper. Of the moment. Vanessa looked from me to the envelope. What is it? She asked. I didn't answer her yet. I opened it myself. Slowly. Carefully. The paper unfolded with a soft sound as I laid it flat on the table. A custodial account, I said. Opened when I was a child. For college. My father stepped closer. Vanessa leaned in. My mother stayed exactly where she was. March 14th, I continued, pointing. Full withdrawal, $41,000. Vanessa frowned. That doesn't... I moved my finger lower. Authorized by Gloria Holloway. The room stilled. Vanessa picked up the paper with both hands. Read it. Then again. Slower. Mom, her voice tightened. You told me this was your savings. No answer. You said Lena's fund was gone. I did what was necessary, my mother said. Not denial. Repositioning. For who? I asked. Quiet. Direct. I was taking care of this family. You were taking care of Vanessa. Vanessa flinched. I didn't know, she said quickly. Lena, I didn't know. I met her eyes. I believe you. And I did. But belief didn't erase what happened. My father sank into a chair, hand covering his mouth. Gloria, you showed me statements, he said. You said the account failed. It was complicated, she replied, too fast. No, he said quietly, it isn't. Silence followed, the kind that doesn't wait to be fixed. I rested my hands on the table. I'm not asking for the money back. That shifted everything. I don't need it, I said. I built my life without it. My mother looked at me, really looked this time, like she didn't recognize where I was standing. But this, I added softly, gesturing to the paper, to the room, to everything that could no longer be rewritten, this stops here. Vanessa placed the statement back down carefully. My father said nothing more. He didn't need to. And my mother, for the first time, had nowhere to move the story. Just the truth, sitting in front of her, in a house she said I'd never have. Some of you listening know what it's like to draw a line not out of anger but out of self-respect. If that's you, stay with us.